This is Robert Clinkenbeard and David Anderson with the Commercial Landscapers Podcast. We're going to take 20 minutes of your life to deliver some amazing business content from accomplished leaders to bring you value, scale your business, and better yourself personally. We hope you really enjoy the show, and I encourage you to share with your network so they can subscribe and we can expand these messages globally. We are also super excited to be supported by two brilliant sponsors. If you're tired of measuring properties, Site Recon platform fully automates measurements so you can focus on sales. So think measurements, think Site Recon. The other sponsor is Company Cam, who make it dead simple to communicate, document, and problem solve with guys in the field, no matter where you are. Company Cam brings documentation, communication, and liability protection together in one simple, easy to use app for you and your entire team. Company Cam is the only app every landscaper needs. Check it out. Hi everyone, this is Robert Clinkenbeard with the Commercial Landscapers Podcast. I am really excited today to be joined by Katrina Fehring. So thank you for joining us. I believe you're a partner with the Pacific HRIS Group, Katrina?
Correct. Yes, indeed I am.
Cool. Well, tell me a little bit about your background for the listeners, please.
Well, thank you, Robert, for having me join you. So I am a seasoned HR professional. I've done HR my entire career and have held all roles from being, an assistant in an HR department to running my own department as the Chief Human Resources Officer. At this point in my career, I transitioned to doing HR consulting, specifically to bring kind of that high-level HR expertise to small and mid-sized businesses that would traditionally not be able to afford or would make sense for them to have a chief HR officer on board. And typically it's HR is a hat that an owner or a operations director, maybe even just an office manager is responsible for. And HR isn't rocket science, but there are a lot of different ways to apply it based on your business, your industry, your size. And so it can be a little bit overwhelming. And that's where I come in and help make sure that we're setting up companies to run smoothly, efficiently, and compliantly.
That was awesome. Yeah. And I remember when I had my company with tons of employees, and I felt as though it was such a minefield to go through because, you feel as though you know things, but as you probably know better than me, the laws seem to change, especially when you're dealing with multi-states and all the different changes there. So, yeah, I definitely appreciate what you do. So you probably, experienced a lot of, I suppose, interesting questions when all of the business owners have been going through these challenging times over the last, 12, 13 months, and probably things that you have never experienced before, especially around working from home. So talk through how you're handling that or how you're advising companies.
Yes, absolutely. Well, certainly you're right. It is a constantly, particularly volatile and dynamic environment that we're operating in right now with regards to COVID. So obviously we all had to jump through hoops last year and put together site safety plans and figure out how to shut down, how to get people set up to work remotely, how to manage workforce, whether it was layoffs or putting people interimly on leaves, lots of different arrangements depending on the employer and what was needed to keep the business afloat. And now we're looking at, as the vaccines are available, we're looking at what do we do about requiring vaccines, not requiring vaccines, and the initial guidance from the EEOC was that you could require it. So I've been guiding clients on how to implement a policy around that allows them some flexibility depending on how things continue to evolve, and also based on what the nature of their business is and the necessity for protecting the business by making sure that more people are vaccinated within their organization. And then when you decide that you want to reopen, how do you go about doing that, given
Yeah,
the evolving nature?
challenging, I
Uh,
know.
yeah, so it's not like we're clear where we're at, and every organization and their employees and the type of work that they do will dictate how that happens. And then we also have to stay on top of all of the safety protocols, and making sure we're having worker safety as a priority and keeping people educated about what's okay and what's not. How do you handle all the records from all of this period of time? It's covered by rules with regards to OSHA, as well as medical information, so the HIPAA privacy laws. Uh,
Yeah, that's a lot of
so
stuff.
all of those things, yes, to be dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, I was seeing just before we started recording that, I've even heard some challenges now where obviously some states are now beginning to open back up. There's a lot more vaccines available. They're starting to, request that employees come back into work, obviously with, guidelines in place, but, either the employees have genuine fears about coming back to work, or perhaps they're now used to working from home environment. They're not having to deal with traveling, and puts that owner in that challenging position where what do they do? Do they force them back, and what guidance do they take from for people like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as with so many issues, the most important thing is that you have a solid policy about what your expectations are with regards to returning to work. And then from there, you can deal with those individual situations. And just like we had at the beginning of the pandemic, we had infrastructure businesses that were able to continue operations through despite the pandemic. They obviously had to have a lot of very important protocols put into place in order for them to be able to continue to function. But there were employees that were concerned. And if you have a solid policy, then you can look at that and determine if there is a need for an accommodation, a real need. Is this based on a medical need? And so you could handle that as a specific accommodation rather than I'm doing it for this person, but I'm not doing it for that person. And if there is not a legitimate reason, then you have it's totally up to you. The ball is in your court to be able to make the decision of what action you're going to take with regards to that employee. And you have every right to say, well, if you're choosing not to return to work, just like if somebody decides they're not going to show up for work, it's job abandonment. And people have that right and they have that choice. Most states, many states have employment at will, which is at any point in time, somebody can decide it's not the right job for them. And if that's the need and it's not based on something that is protected, which you've already laid out in your clear policy, then it's easier to navigate how you make those decisions and handle those specific situations.
Right, but I assume there's many situations where probably most company policies, they didn't have anything like this already in their book. So, and perhaps a lot of them have not had a chance to go back through and review them. So I assume there's probably quite a few scrambling to try and figure out what are those policies, and is that then seen by those employees that they're just rushing to deal with that specific scenario?
That may be the case, but that is always the case. And it's very
Right,
clear in any employee handbook that you say that all those policies are subject to change at any time.
right.
And as the situation requires it, then you will issue that policy as needed. And, for example, there's the new relief bill that President Biden signed, ARPA, and it has many HR relevant topics, including the extension of the emergency sick time. And we have an overlapping law in California as well for that the Governor Gavin Newsom signed to also addresses emergency sick time for people having effects from getting the COVID vaccine, right? They would be able to use that emergency sick time. And in California, that's down to employers that have 5 employees. And so, yes, you would not have had a policy in place before, and you put it in place now.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, it's definitely, it goes back to my comment at the beginning that, it's definitely a little bit of a minefield that, to keep up to date with all of those law changes is certainly something that I know when I was on my business that it was almost impossible to keep track of. And so that's why I used to rely on my HR office manager. But yeah, there's definitely professionals out there like yourself. They were able to go in and independently help companies. Now, when you typically take on a new client who's either unfortunately in the middle of some type of scenario and realize they need help, I mean, what are some of the issues you typically see when you start to sort of pull back the layers on whether you look at their handbook or what they're dealing with within the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So our approach when we work with a new client is to do an initial full assessment of their whole HR operations, and then also become familiar with strategically, where are they at as an organization? Where are they? What are their goals in terms of where they want to take the business, next stages? And from that, we can build a plan for, first level is compliance, making sure we've got everything locked and loaded. The next step is, are we doing things as efficiently as possible? It may be that they need a different system for how they're managing their employee information. They may not be in the proper HRIS system. They may not be using an effective payroll system. Uh, some of the biggest pitfalls that I see that are the riskiest for employers is around wage and hour compliance. So we often start there. Do we have people properly classified? Again, in California, we have a new law that went into effect as of the beginning of this year with regards to independent contractor classification. I expect numerous states will follow suit and develop similar laws as well. And what it does is it really restricts how you can use workers that are not paid through payroll. And that is a huge liability. If you have somebody misclassified and you're paying them as a contractor, you haven't been paying your employment taxes on them, and you have no records necessarily of what their hours worked were, and any claim can be made. So that's a huge liability under wage and hours. So that's one of the biggest risk areas that we find is problems with how wage and hour compliance has been handled. Certainly, handbooks are they constantly need to be updated. Typically, I say at least every 3 years, but these days it's about every 6 months.
Yeah, I used to do every year. Just used to, get somebody, an external party just to go in and review them. So just to cover myself.
Yes, and that's, everything is fine until something goes wrong, and then that's when, if you don't have your updated handbook, if you don't have policies that are compliant, if you don't have policies that meet with the way that your business needs to operate, there are a lot of things that are up to employer discretion. How you do vacation and sick time, or do you do PTO? And that nobody says that you have to even offer vacation time. You're required to offer sick time, but it's up to you. You can set those parameters up however you want. So does it make sense for your business? And those things if you review those on a regular basis and update as you need to, that's always a very important factor that comes into play when we work with a client. And then there just are ongoing issues. So when you're dealing with employee issues, if you have a sensitive separation, a toxic employee that you need that's influencing your culture in a negative way that you need to deal with, sometimes they're even a top performer, but the cost and impact to the rest of the organization needs to be dealt with. And we look to past practice. So we really dig into, you don't just get the pat answer of what you could look up and Google, but actually look at how you've handled things in the past and what makes sense for your business individually for how you handle those situations. Because past practice is one of the primary things that if anything does get to the legal front, will be dug out and pointed to. So we make sure that there is continuity and consistency there for you.
That's good. And I'm assuming that, if companies are having some particular issue, and then they're contacting, someone like yourself, a lot of the time it's potentially too late because they're already in pretty deep trouble. Whereas, the preferential part is to go through some type of an ongoing updates on what your policies are on a regular basis. Because a lot of people will think, well, I need to save money by not using some of the external, but then that usually catches up with them if they've been doing something that's non-compliant.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah,
that fair?
so it's kind of like going to the dentist, right?
Yeah.
You can go just when you get a toothache, right? And then maybe you have to get a root canal, or you can just do your regular every 6 months, go get your teeth cleaned, they check it out, they see a problem, maybe they can just do a filling or something else, So if you want to run your business in crisis management mode, you can do that and end up with the root canal. Or you can invest in proper, just ongoing best practices for how you run your business. And yeah, does it take some time and energy and resources to do that? Yes, but you sleep better at night. You've got yourself covered. You don't have to be worried about what's around the corner. You can feel confidence. There's no guarantees, I understand, but you can be reassured that you've set yourself up in the best way possible
Right.
for situations that might come down the pipe.
Yeah, that makes sense. And along those same lines, I've seen both scenario work well, where you've either got some internal, HR office manager type person that has the handbook in front of them, but also seen a scenario where, there's been an external company used, and that external company can be just used as a little bit of a buffer, almost like that independent viewpoint that can maybe, prevent certain scenarios going down, a certain path. Even I suppose an example being if there's some type of harassment case at work, then if you have some type of external resource, then usually they could deal with that pretty quickly.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
have you seen scenarios like that?
All the time. It's one of the biggest benefits. Even as an internal HR practitioner, I would oftentimes need to bring in, and unfortunately, many times it would end up having to be an employment attorney, right, who would come in because I needed to have somebody who wasn't as connected as I was being internal. So it's one of the things that I love being able to do for owners, employers, businesses, is be that external third party. It definitely, there is no way to get that objective perspective, and that objective perspective brought to the conversation. I'm a certified mediator, and I've seen firsthand how having somebody else who is viewed by both parties as being external and more objective, it creates more of a more powerful ombudsman role for the organization. And you can sidestep so many issues by somebody just feeling like they have this, just the thought that there is somebody else that they could call and talk to. It's like having the security blanket in the back pocket, and it may never come to anything. When you don't feel like you have that safety blanket, that's when employees turn to other external, they'll go talk to a friend of a friend who has, a lawyer, and they say, oh, you look into that, right? No, you want to come talk to me first, and let's see if we can solve things. And I also appreciate that sometimes there's hard news to be delivered. And it's difficult for some people, given the relationship that's necessary to be supportive and positive with your employees. You want that kind of a culture. And so when there's some tough stuff that needs to be delivered, being able to rely on an outside person to assist with that, kind of be a little bit of the bad cop, good cop, bad cop. It really is a helpful dynamic in some situations as well.
Cool. So I've got a couple more questions left, but for those up and coming companies, maybe they've got 10, 20, 30 employees. They've, been fly by the seat of their pants up until this point. Now they realize, they're onto a good thing, and now they need to start to buckle down and, bring some resources in. I mean, at what stage, or what would you recommend for those companies and being that first stage, and how to, transition into being that more compliant, especially around the HR side?
Yeah, well, actually, for those organizations, sometimes that's really where not so much the compliance piece, but the capacity building piece is critical. And so making sure you've got the proper infrastructure in place to allow a smooth growth. I've seen so many organizations where they've tried to take that leap without the infrastructure in place, and particularly when you hit different thresholds. So there are different laws that hit when you are 5, 10, 25, 50, 100. And if you don't look ahead to where you're going strategically, what you think your headcount's going to be, what is your workforce going to look like, what is your management structure going to need to be, how are you going to have employee communications in place to facilitate all of those types of things. So there's a big organizational as well as system prep that you can do. And I see organizations that don't do that. They don't do the planning that's necessary. They take the leap. Their systems can't handle it. The organizational structure can't handle it. And that's when things start to break down. And then you hit a plateau. You have to pause. And so we'll come in and we'll help those organizations get it done. But I love it when I work with an owner, an employer who has the foresight to plan ahead, and we can put those things in place in advance so that you're ready to go.
That's awesome. So if people want to find out more, how do people get in touch with you, Katrina?
I would love to point people to our website. It's got a lot of great information. There's articles, there's blogs, there's write-ups about us, there's testimonials from our current clients, and a way to contact us directly there. So that's PCG, so that's for Pacific Crest Group, PCG-services.com.
Cool, thank you. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today, Katrina. A lot of great information. You've obviously, I think you've, given a lot of teasers out there that, people need to start thinking about, being compliant, and it's obviously these relief laws coming in. So thank you for your time today. I think our listeners will get some great insight from you. So thank you again.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Margaret.
Hopefully that was pure dead brilliant for you today, and we've got some great takeaways for your business and your personal life. This is Robert Clinkenbeard along with David Anderson, and we'd love to get you and your friends to join us on our journey. 2 quick things before you go, listeners. Check out our website, thecommerciallandscaper.com. You can subscribe, you can share with your friends, but more importantly, check out our sponsors. We have Site Recon, who are going to help to capture measurements on your property and create a really streamlined process. And we have Company Cam, who make it dead simple to communicate, document, and problem solve with guys in the field, no matter where you are. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.